Popsicles, sprinklers, a cool breeze. Talk about refreshing. You know what else is refreshing this summer? A brand new phone with Verizon. Yep, get a new phone on any plan with Select Phone Trade-in and My Plan. And lock down a low price for 3 years on any plan with My Plan. This is a deal for everyone, whether you're a new or existing customer. Swing by Verizon today for our best phone deals. 3-year price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate only. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.
Wayfair's Labor Day clearance is here. Right now, score up to 70% off everything home. Plus, fast shipping on everything right to your door. Shop now through September 2nd at wayfair.com.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Hello and welcome to mini episode 469 of Real Life Ghost Stories, and I have 2 spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from the 10th of May 2025. And story number 1 comes from Kelly. I've had odd happenings all my life. I would describe myself as a skeptic believer. I always try to debunk before making an opinion of validity based on a scale of likely or not likely, but I'm adamant that not all is easily explained. I'm sharing this after recent experiences have made me reflect. Number 4 High Street, in a sleepy little village in East Yorkshire. It overlooks the river and a town in the distance. A 2-up, 2-down, spacious old Victorian semi-detached house built in 1871, with tall ceilings and odd-shaped rooms that are parallelograms. The only rooms that were square was the small extension built in the early 90s to house a utility room and a bathroom. It was an odd house, but it felt like home. Me and my partner Charlie moved into number 4 in 2013 in our early 20s. It was our first house together, which we rented and then bought from the landlady. It was all a bit fast, as I was to become homeless after caring for my dying grandfather who had raised me when my mother died. We settled in, learning to live together and build a life. The reason I'm comfortable sharing the things that happened in number 4 is that unlike a lot of things I experienced previously, I had a witness to some of these, my wife. It doesn't just help validate the experience, but also confirms, I hope, that I am neither imagining, embellishing, or schizophrenic. The downstairs consisted of the living room as you entered the house, and the kitchen, then a small 1-story extension containing the utility and the bathroom. We always sat in the kitchen to eat, to watch telly and to talk. Very rarely did we sit in the front room. It was not only a cold room, but it was a room with a heavy atmosphere. One of the first decisions we made as a couple was to get a husky. Now this husky was playful, full of energy, but she would stop and stare at a corner of the room by the fireplace. Not just stare, but lightly huff and puff, half growling. At first we thought it was a spider or a fly that was making her react this way, but I could never find anything. We brushed it off until we got her a friend about 4 to 6 months later, and he would do exactly the same thing. Huff and puff and stare at this corner. We eventually started to decorate and make a home on a tight budget. A bit like the house, our decorating choices were quirky and odd. Every time we would decorate, we would smell cigar smoke in the utility room. We both smelt it for a few minutes, then it would disappear. Neither of us smoked, and cigar smoke is a very distinctive smell. Again, we brushed it off until we saw a pattern. Whenever we decorated or changed something significant, we would smell this. We started to joke at this point that someone didn't approve of our quirky taste. We both at this point worked shift work, which included shifts throughout the day. Whoever would get home late at night and the other one was sleeping in the bedroom, we would sleep on the couch in the living room so as not to disturb the other. One night after coming in late, I fell asleep on the couch and I woke hearing someone downstairs. I initially assumed it was Charlie and she had come downstairs to the toilet, but I soon realised it wasn't her. The footsteps sounded like men's workman boots with heavy soles. I could hear him walking around the wooden kitchen floor. I could hear the sound of a teaspoon clinking against a mug as if a cup of tea was being made. At this point, all the hairs on my arms and neck were up, and I thought we had an intruder. I was terrified, holding my breath as if my breath would alert him to my presence in the next room. I heard the footsteps come closer through the small hallway till they reached the carpet and then quiet. I could see no one by the light of the television. I searched the downstairs and no one was there. It couldn't have been from the attached house, number 6, as at that point it was empty, and had been for about 5 years. I told this to Charlie the next day. She laughed and told me I must have still been dreaming and was half asleep. A few weeks later, Charlie had come in from the late shift and she went to sleep on the sofa. She woke up and messaged me saying, "Are you downstairs?" I was awake and replied, "No." I came downstairs and she said, "I heard exactly what you heard. Footsteps, the clinking of a teaspoon, and then feet stopping at the carpet." She looked scared, although I felt relieved, and said, "I told you so." We both went back to sleep upstairs that night. Sometimes we would come into the kitchen and the cupboard doors would all be open. Regularly, the cupboard doors that boxed in the electricity meter would be open too. After we got married and had our first child, the TV in the kitchen would randomly turn on when no one was in the room. Sometimes when you were awake and sometimes in the middle of the night. This would happen 4 to 6 times a week, and originally we believed there was something wrong with the remote until the television in the living room started to do the same and turn on randomly. I remember we had previously told our neighbour who lived next door in number 6 the odd happenings at number 4, and asked if they had similar experiences to which they didn't. She had popped around for a chat, and halfway through some chit-chat the TV turned on by itself. She looked taken aback and wide-eyed, as if the crazy woman next door did actually have a ghost. I smiled and said, "Told you so." Around this time we would start to refer to the ghost as George, and we still do to this day. My wife was home alone while I was at work. She woke up in the middle of the night for no reason. A little boy stood before her, who was fair-haired with dungarees and was standing by the fireplace. She said the boy was dirty and dripping in water. She saw him for about 15 seconds looking at her before walking out, and then he disappeared. She said she was calm, not afraid, and drifted off back to sleep. We later found out that the husband married to her maternal grandmother, who grew up in the village, had lost a brother on the riverbank opposite the house in the 40s. He was 5 years old and was standing on the riverbank watching a boat go by, and the wake of the boat passing swept him in. He was later found by him in a town 10 miles up the river a few days later. My wife believes this to be the boy that she saw. One time I had again come in from an evening shift and had a quick turnaround due to staff sickness, so I slept on the sofa due to an early start. This incident scared me. I felt dread and fear, questioning myself. I was dreaming. In fact, this wasn't a dream, it was a nightmare, the type that feels so real when you wake up you struggle to grasp what's reality for a few minutes. I rarely have nightmares, and if I do, they are never of this nature. I was a predator, but it wasn't me. It was like I was looking through the eyes of someone doing horrific things. It didn't feel like my body. I felt male in nature. In the dream, I was hunting, stalking someone. I felt primal, bloodthirsty, murderous, carnivorous. I was close to attacking someone in my nightmare. I woke to the noise of a toy going off, a preschool toy playing a nursery rhyme. This toy was called a Chase Me Casey toy monkey. I got up and looked to turn it off and found it under the sofa where I was sleeping, exactly under me. The room felt heavy, ominous, malevolent. I didn't feel alone. I could feel the hairs standing up on my arms and neck. My alarm went off a minute later, as if I was intentionally awoken before it. I got ready for work and left very fast, feeling uncomfortable and unsettled. I discarded the toy, but never slept in the living room again. The wife would just have to deal with my comings and goings upstairs. I started this story telling you how my grandfather passed away and how I nursed him in the last moments of his life. This is relevant to this part of the story. There was a breakdown in family connections as my remaining few members of family were toxic. After my grandfather's death, I cut ties and I never looked back. I didn't visit his grave for about 8 years as I just couldn't bring myself to. He was and is the last person, excluding my wife, who has ever cared for me truly. When I did visit, I found my auntie, the next of kin, had not arranged for his name and details to be added to his grave shared with my grandmother. I felt overcome with grief again and I was devastated. I cried all the way home. When I got home, I was discussing the situation and the personal guilt I had felt not visiting or knowing his grave did not have his name on. When this red Toy Story balloon from my son's birthday, a few days before, was moving. It was moving in a very strange way, gently up and down and around, forwards and backwards. The way it was moving was odd, and we both commented on it and how none of the other foil balloons were doing the same. We continued to talk about the turmoil I felt, and this balloon started to come to me. Whenever I moved, it moved next to me. The balloon then moved and slowly went upstairs. It went into our room, and I followed. We checked for windows being open, drafts, etc., and nothing. This balloon continued to move as if it was being held. This went on for what felt like hours. It was probably only 45 minutes. I went and lay down on my bed, exhausted from the emotions I felt watching it, feeling comforted. I fell asleep watching it move, and when I woke maybe 20 minutes later, the balloon was on the bed, inches from my face, staring at me. My story concludes with us leaving number 4 while planning to extend our family with our last baby. We had outgrown number 4, and while looking for a property before starting to introduce another member of our family, our neighbours and good friends put next door on the market. Next door was built exactly like number 4, quirky and odd, but it was 3 times the size, with an attached partially converted barn. I should note that number 4 and 6 were owned jointly since 1871. Till the early 90s, number 6 was once an electric shop, and the barn was originally a working threshing barn, and a tractor was stored inside. Number 6 wasn't in as good condition as number 4, but had bags of potential, which I still tell myself, when we moved in 2.5 years ago. We've since had our daughter. We've always commented on how light the house feels compared to number 4, and have not had any experiences. That is until recently. I've finished refurbing the rooms upstairs and I've recently moved on to the downstairs. Last month I started to remove layers of wallpaper in the playroom. Originally the kitchen when built, ready for plastering, some of which looked like it could have been original, possibly Edwardian. This wallpaper on the ceiling was varnished, something done in Victorian and Edwardian times to make it hardy, reducing mould and damp. Since then, unlike number 4's cigar smoke, I have heard and seen things. Firstly, I heard the sound of cutlery being bunched together as if in someone's hand and rattling in the drawer. Then I heard a few nights later the sounds of cupboard doors opening and closing and seeing legs briefly walking into our bedroom as I passed in a rush to give the baby a bottle late at night. In the barn, the pull string light switch being placed over the main wooden beam out of the barn. My wife confirmed that she didn't put the cord over the beam and neither did I, but I distinctly remember seeing this light cord being draped over the beam when we first moved in. It has since done this twice more. Only I accessed the upper barn. Perhaps George has decided to visit, or maybe number 6 has other guests. I'm not sure what to believe about the paranormal other than it does happen. There is something. Whether it is stone tape theory, time slips or classic ghosts, one thing is for sure, we are not imagining it. I would stand in the kitchen in the same spot and feel like the palm of a hand was pressing in between my shoulder blades. I would turn around looking for someone and pull at my shirt as if, why is there pressure being applied to my back? It would last a few minutes and then disappear. In the same spot in my kitchen, my wife would feel tugging at the bottom of her trousers as if a cat or a dog was nuzzling or playfully pulling at her legs. The cord continued to be moved in the barn for those few weeks and then nothing. Not a peep in more than a year. I was, however, reviewing some old paperwork for the house, original deeds and fancy writing and wax seals. Number 4 and 6 were built by John George Walker. The next owner 10 years later was called George. Now, don't get me wrong, George was a very common name, hardly incidental at the time. However, out of all the names we could have randomly picked, no reason to pick as no one we know is called George, but we called the ghost George. It's uncanny. I know that there feels like a lot of threads going on in number 4. It just never felt like one entity or person. And I would like to add to this that the person who now lives at number 4 has posted a TikTok about the paranormal experiences that she's experiencing in number 4. And I don't know whether to share the TikTok or not. I know that it's like, you know, she's posted on her TikTok, which is a public forum or whatever, but I don't have her permission to post it. But just so you know, the person who now lives at number 4 is also experiencing paranormal activity. And I do love these old English houses where they end up being rickety and oddly shaped and weird. And they always have such character. And it sounds like these houses have a lot of character indeed. And, you know, like we always say, dogs are often the first indicators that maybe something is not right. And clearly both huskies, both dogs were like, oh, there's something in that corner near the fireplace. And that was your first warning, I would say. And I have read before, I always say they do say, I don't know who they is, like who are these people that are saying these things, but they do say that renovation, redecoration, etc. can trigger paranormal activity. Now, whether that's like literally as simple as you're redecorating the house and an old owner of the house or an old, you know, person who lived in the house is expressing their either approval or disapproval. And I agree with you, like cigar smoke is a really distinctive smell. I actually love the smell of cigar smoke. And I think establishing that pattern is really interesting, that you went, oh, it's when we change things. Because of course, maybe previous owners of the house are like, oh, I don't like that wallpaper choice, or I don't like that quirky decoration that you've done, you know? And again, I can easily see how your wife was like, oh, you know, you were probably asleep. You were sleeping downstairs and you heard footsteps and the sound of someone making tea. You were probably asleep. And then she then heard it later. Like, that is the validation you need. And I would also be like, haha, I told you so. But it's very interesting, almost like stone tape theory situation, like you said, sort of at the end of the email, that in that instance, it sounds like an echo through time. Heavy boots, clinking of a teaspoon in a mug, as if someone's making tea. And I think this phenomenon of cupboard doors being found open is also, it's so common in these stories. It happens all the time in haunted houses. Is it because it's an easy thing for entities to do, to show you that they're there? Like there is a real visual representation of the fact that they have been there and they have done this thing. The door was closed, now it's open, I've done that, and you can see that. And TVs turning on randomly, like that's also very open, visual, hello, look at me, I am here. And it is interesting that you guys started calling the presence George and then later found out that George was like the name of, you know, previous people who had built and lived there. And I see what you're saying, like George, you know, wasn't really an unfamiliar name, but I do still think it's interesting. Out of all the names that you could have chosen, you went for George. And you're right when you say, like, it does sound like there's a lot of different stuff going on in this house, like a lot of different threads, a lot of different entities, you know, seeing this wet, dirty young boy in dungarees by the fireplace and then finding out that there was a boy who drowned in the river opposite the house in the 1940s. That's insane. Because again, you could say, oh, it's probably just like a sleep paralysis or a dream or whatever. And then you find out later, oh no, a boy did die because he was swept into a river and found 10 miles downstream. And somebody connected to both you as members of the household and the village. And maybe, you know, and I hate using this word, but I seem to use it all the time for someone who hates using it. But maybe we've got a sort of, you know, portal type energy in this house. Something that is allowing all these spirits to come in. Maybe it's to do with the location, the ground. Maybe it's just simply to do with history. And I do love the red balloon story, although I would not love the balloon being in my face when I woke up. I would definitely freak out at that. But I do think if you get like a gut feeling that this is your grandfather trying to kind of bring you comfort or whatever, then that's the way to understand that. That's the way to interpret it, so you can get that bit of closure from it. And it is really interesting that you sort of moved into number 6 and stuff is still happening. You know, you're seeing legs entering the bedroom, you're hearing the sounds of cutlery rattling, you're feeling things like hands on the back, people tugging at trouser legs, whatever, and then all of a sudden it stops. Was that a case of entities being like, we still see you, we still recognize you, or was it just a change of mood? Was it a change of atmosphere, of energy? Who knows? But yeah, like I said, currently weird shit is still happening in number 4. I've seen the TikTok. I have seen the paranormal activity that is still going on. So you can rest assured this has not just happened to Kelly and Charlie.
Popsicles, sprinklers, a cool breeze. Talk about refreshing. You know what else is refreshing this summer? A brand new phone with Verizon. Yep, get a new phone on any plan with Select Phone Trade-in and My Plan. And lock down a low price for 3 years on any plan with My Plan. This is a deal for everyone, whether you're a new or existing customer. Swing by Verizon today for our best phone deals. 3-year price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate only. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.
Ever wonder why you have insurance for your car or home, but not your digital life? Meet WebRoot Total Protection, your digital bodyguard that is built for real life. WebRoot takes the guessing game out of cybersecurity, so you can confidently browse, bank, and be yourself online without the worry of hackers lurking around the corner. With WebRoot Total Protection, you get antivirus that scans 6 times faster and takes up 33 times less space than the other guys. Identity protection with up to $1 million in fraud expense reimbursement and 24/7 U.S.-based customer support. VPN protection that hides your IP address, personal data, and location from hackers. And cloud backup with unlimited storage that works automatically in the background. With plans for individuals and families, WebRoot makes it easy to live a better digital life. Go to webroot.com/promo and get 50% off today. That's webroot.com/promo to get 50% off today. Live a better digital life with WebRoot, because peace of mind shouldn't be optional.
And story number 2 comes from Gayle. Around 15 years ago, when I was working as a hairdresser, I agreed to visit a client at her home. She couldn't make it into the salon because she was recovering from surgery, and I offered to maintain her haircut from the comfort of her house. It seemed like a kind and simple gesture at times. I had no idea what I was walking into. From the moment I stepped through her front door, something felt off. It wasn't anything you could put your finger on. The house looked normal enough, but the energy was wrong. It was the kind of place that makes you look around expecting to see someone else in the room, like the walls are watching. She led me into the kitchen, which was quite ordinary, and I got on with washing her hair and setting up my things. She sat in a chair, relaxed and ready, but I couldn't settle. The whole time I was working, I felt deeply uncomfortable, watched, crowded, suffocated. It was as though someone was standing right behind me, far too close, invading my space. The air around me felt heavy and oppressive, and I began to sweat, feeling nauseous and clammy. Then it happened. I felt breath on the back of my neck, distinct, real and terrifying. The sensation was so vivid, it was like someone who was right there, breathing down my neck with malicious intent. I didn't dare to turn around. It felt like if I did, I might see something I couldn't unsee, and then, in a low, chilling whisper, I heard the words,
"Get out."
Over and over and over again. I froze, trying to hold it together for the sake of my client. I rushed through the haircut, every moment feeling longer than the last. I could barely breathe, let alone think clearly. As soon as I'd finished, I gathered my things and practically ran to my car. Once inside, I locked the doors and just sat there, shaking. I'm not particularly religious, but I remembered pieces of the Lord's Prayer which I recited over and over. I did everything I could think of to protect myself, visualising white light, whispering Hail Marys, making the sign of the cross. I was desperate not to bring anything home with me. I had never felt anything like this before, and I never want to again. Weeks later, when the client was finally able to come into the salon, I worked up the nerve to ask her if she had ever noticed anything strange in her house. She was surprisingly open. She explained that the home had been rebuilt on the ruins of an old quarry house. She said that other family members had commented on how unsettling the place felt, that it never seemed welcoming, and that she had done photographs that I really ought to see. At the next appointment, she showed me photographs documenting the construction of the house. As I looked through them, there was an image that made my blood run cold. In a couple of the frames, taken during the early stage of the build, there was a translucent figure of a woman. You could see her clearly. Long, stringy hair, glowing green eyes, in a gown that wasn't quite any known style. She didn't look friendly. She didn't look alive. And she was most definitely there. I have never been back to that house. I moved away not long after and lost touch with the client, and honestly, I am grateful for that. The experience haunts me to this day. I've done many home visits in my career, but nothing has ever come close to what I felt in that house. I don't know what was there, but I know that it didn't want me there. And I listened. Oh my God, that has given me such heebie-jeebies. I like the approach of trying to think of anything protective and being like, right, white light, Hail Marys, sign of the cross, bits of the Our Father. I am throwing it all at this situation. I love it. That's my kind of attitude. But this is really terrifying. Like, you walk into this house and obviously something told you, hey, this is not a good place to be. And I am curious as to whether you've had those kind of feelings before. And it's, I'm glad for you that you were able to say it to the client later and say, look, has anything ever happened in your house? It felt a bit weird and unsettling. And she was able to confirm that other people, had said that it was unsettling. It never seemed welcoming. And then she obviously showed you those photographs of this terrifying woman with long stringy hair and glowing green eyes and a dress that wasn't really any known style, because that is absolutely petrifying. Like, I wonder, did your client experience anything? Because it doesn't sound like she did. It sounds like she was sort of just there living with it and it wasn't impacting her. Because I don't know if you could live with an entity like that. Like, we talk all the time about how people live in haunted houses, and often because they can't leave, etc., etc., it's not as easy to just up and leave a house. But in this instance, if something was like deeply unfriendly and negative, like whispering get out over and over and over, and you have physical pictures of this entity, and then you just live with that. So why is it that you could feel it and this woman living in the house couldn't? Is it simply that actually entities have no control over who they, I was going to say expose themselves to, but you know what I mean? And it's down to how the person, the experiencer, if they're able to experience things or not. I mean, whatever it is, it sounds absolutely terrifying. And you'd like to think it's just like a ghost maybe who's a bit angry and not something malevolent. And I never, ever, use the word demons to describe something and, an evil entities or whatever, because I just feel like it creates unnecessary fear, right? But whatever this is, clearly was not happy. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Kelly and Gayle for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from the 10th of May, 2025. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
Popsicles, sprinklers, a cool breeze. Talk about refreshing. You know what else is refreshing this summer? A brand new phone with Verizon. Yep, get a new phone on any plan with Select Phone Trade-in and My Plan. And lock down a low price for 3 years on any plan with My Plan. This is a deal for everyone, whether you're a new or existing customer. Swing by Verizon today for our best phone deals. 3-year price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate only. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.